My wife, 32 years old, and I, 32 years old, welcomed a new baby into our lives a month ago. Since then, my wife has been suffering from postpartum depression, PPD. I have been, or tried to be, supportive in any way I can. Meal preps, cleaning, helping with the baby, diaper changes, feeding, etc. I do what I can. My wife has her good days and bad days, and we have been going to therapy together. For a while, my wife's frustration with the baby had been increasing to the point where there were breakdowns and yelling due to stress, which I understand. Recently, it has gotten to a boiling point where my wife will scream and yell sometimes at me and sometimes at the baby. When it comes to me, it's usually because I didn't do something right, like feeding, diaper changes, or basically anything related to the baby, and she insists on doing it herself. But then she will start screaming and yelling at the baby when it starts to cry. I'm assuming it can sense that mom isn't feeling well either, and we just end up fueling each other's frustration. This is when things get ugly. Yesterday, I came home from work and the place looked like a bomb went off. That's not an issue in itself, but what was the issue is that I found our baby alone, on the floor, in the closet, with the door shut. I immediately picked up the baby and started looking for my wife. When I found her, I asked, as gently as I could without suggesting otherwise, why our baby was in a closet. She began screaming and breaking down about needing a break. Again, I have been doing everything in my power to help. But she insists on taking care of the baby herself, and my paternity leave doesn't last forever. Her crying triggered the baby to start crying. And before I could turn around to take the baby elsewhere to soothe, she suddenly lunges with a stony face towards the baby and grabs. Hard. I managed to shield the baby and shove my wife to the floor. This is where I feel I might be the jerk. I told her off, basically, that I have done everything I could have possibly done to help her, from therapy to keeping up with the chores, but I can't help her if she refuses to let me help with the baby. I told her I am taking the baby to my parents, and that is where we, the baby, will stay until she can gather her senses and get proper help, whether it be a different therapist or some sort of medication, which I will support. Since that evening, I have been getting calls and texts from not only her but her family as well, threatening divorce and taking full custody if I go through with this decision, and how I cannot keep a month-old infant separated from her mother. In my mind, it's for the baby's safety, and the last thing I want is for my wife to do something she will regret. Am I the jerk here? Edit. Wow, I cannot believe how quickly this blew up and all of the support and advice given to me. I suppose I shall give a quick summary of my plan going from here. First thing is first, I don't intend to stay with my parents and leave my wife alone. I brought the baby to them, and I stayed the first night to gather my thoughts. The baby will stay with them for the time being, and I will be spending time with both the baby and my wife to make sure she is getting help. I have seen a lot of comments inquiring about my wife's family. Unfortunately, her parents live out of state, a very large chunk of them are. I did go back and address them all in a family group chat, explaining the situation and why I took the baby. Some were understanding, and some weren't. I understand siding with your sibling daughter, and no one probably wants to hear that they are in such a condition. I don't know if any of those who are understanding are going to come up and help or not, but I doubt it. Her relationship with her family has never been solid, mine always has, and they have been involved since day one. I really, really don't want to get CPS or the police involved, because I know once they are, they will never leave us alone, and I fear it will make things worse down the line with the lingering thought of CPS can come back and determine us no longer fit. I did, however, get in contact with a lawyer and explained my situation with my wife's words, so I do have one on standby in case things take a different turn. I don't understand why the baby was in the closet either. She has a crib, which is in our bedroom for the time being because of a pipe issue in the nursery that is currently being worked on. I don't understand why the baby wasn't in her crib, in our room, and she's somewhere else. But the idea of the closet floor just scared me, especially if something were to fall or, God forbid, I didn't look down before stepping inside to put my things away. And finally, when all of this started, she did in fact have PPD. She was seeing a therapist 2-3 times a week, with me as well for one session. She was professionally diagnosed and prescribed prescription pills, which I assumed were supposed to help. I don't like to pry, and I trusted my wife. I also tried to help with the baby, but she either got upset and told me I was doing something wrong and she would handle it, Or she wouldn't even let me try, and I would let it go. I guess the issue of PPD must have started a week or so ago when she would gradually raise her voice, mostly at me, but eventually also started shifting to the baby. I am going back today with my sister to check on her and try to get her to her doctor if she will go willingly. Now, I will admit I did leave her alone, hoping that perhaps a day of quiet might calm her down enough without any stimulation. Most of my time was spent at the ER, making sure the baby did not have any other underlying damage like a broken bone. The baby was all right, thank God, but we ended up speaking to a professional there, and he told us to bring her in immediately when we can. We live in a one-story house, and she has not shown signs of self-harm to herself, maybe to me now after the stunt I pulled, but that's why I am going with my sister. I expect a few broken things, but oh well. I am not bringing her the baby. I will communicate that the baby is okay, just a little bruised. If she won't go, then I will call an ambulance. I have tried reaching her OB, but they are not in, and I don't know how long it will take to hear back. If what she has is true, that it has turned into PPD, then I will support her in any way I can. That's all the information I have now. Edit 2. This may be the last update for a while, but thank you to those who have offered advice and expressed your support. Yesterday, my sister and I drove down to the house. My wife did answer the door, but only allowed my sister to enter, not me. Saw this coming, so I stayed outside. I don't know what happened, but I heard screaming and went inside. My wife was blowing up at my sister, but had not gotten physical with her. Upon seeing me, she started screaming and yelling at me, telling me I was a POS husband for leaving her and how I could do this to her, and that our baby was better off with her than me. That's when she picked up the nearest thing and aimed for my head. While I tried to calm her down, my sister called the police and an ambulance. Eventually, with help from the cops, we were able to convince her to go in. I ended up going as well and needed some minor stitches. The police did end up taking a report, and I did explain the situation, that she was diagnosed with PPD at the beginning of the month and possibly developed postpartum psychosis, PPP, within the last week or so with the increased aggression towards me and the baby. That I wouldn't know for sure if it was PPP until the doctor properly evaluated her. They recommended, like most of you, to file a report with CPS in case her family decides to fight for custody, to which I did. My wife has PPP. She was admitted to inpatient care for the time being, for how long I am not sure, and will stay there until an evaluation can show she will no longer be a danger to herself. She has refused to speak with me or see me, but wants to see the baby. I am not comfortable leaving the baby alone in there with her, even if my parents or sister were with her, without me or staff. The doctors say not yet, only supervised visits, but to still respect her wishes of me not being present. I tried calling her parents and her siblings and friends. Her friends offered to help with the baby and tidy up the home, which is helpful. Like I said previously, her relationship with her family has never been solid, especially with her parents, but by some miracle, her sister and her mom are making the 10-hour drive. I really don't know what to expect, mainly because my mother-in-law has been dismissive of the PPD from the start, and there is some animosity between my wife and her sister. I don't know the extent of it. My wife won't talk about it. I just hope they are supportive. I also consulted with her OB, who reached back out. Her advice was to go home with the baby, but when my wife is cleared to have a visual with the baby and her at all times, or keep the baby at my parents' if I can't be there in person. I called my employer and explained the situation, and they have extended a few more weeks out of my paid medical leave. I went back home and took in the damage of the house, which was mainly done to my things, and unfortunately the nursery. I spent the rest of the day yesterday with friends, picking up the house and redoing the nursery, and my parents brought the baby back over. My mom is staying with me for the time being until the in-laws get here. Until then, I will be back and forth between the baby and my wife when she is ready to see me. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Nobody is the individual who is behaving inappropriately here, unless you fail to contact every single family member and friend your wife has, in order to obtain help for her. She is very, very ill. She must not be left alone with your child under any circumstances. It is crucial for you to reach out to her parents, siblings, friends, or anyone else who is part of her support system immediately. Call her OB, obstetrician, or her GP, general practitioner, whoever she sees most often. You can even contact the pediatrician, as they often have resources for postpartum issues. Your wife is going through a medical emergency and she needs your assistance. Your priority should be keeping your baby safe and away from your wife until she has fully recovered. Comment 2. You are not in the wrong in this situation. She unjustly confined your baby in the closet. Disregard the opinions of everyone else who is criticizing you. How long was the baby in that situation? What if you had to work late? Inform her family about her dangerous and unsettling behavior so that they can assist her in getting the necessary help. Since they believe they know what is best, let them handle the situation while you focus on keeping your baby secure and maintaining distance from your wife for the time being. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments and advice on my last post. So, the past week has been interesting to say the least. After my wife was admitted for postpartum psychosis, things took a turn I never expected. Her sister and mom finally arrived, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Her mom, who had been dismissive of the PPD, was suddenly all tears and apologies, claiming she never understood the severity. Her sister, on the other hand, was cold and accusatory, blaming me for not doing enough. I tried to keep my cool, but when her sister suggested that my wife's condition was my fault, I lost it. I told her that I had been there every step of the way, unlike them. That's when her sister dropped a bombshell. She revealed that my wife had confided in her about an affair she had right before we found out about the pregnancy. I was floored. The baby, my world, might not even be mine. I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt crept in. I demanded a paternity test. The results would take a week, and that week was the longest of my life. I was torn between anger, betrayal, and the overwhelming love for the baby I had been caring for. Meanwhile, my wife's condition was improving with treatment, and she was asking to see the baby. I agreed to supervised visits, but I couldn't face her, not with the betrayal hanging over us. The day the paternity test results came in, I was a mess. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, and there it was in black and white. I was the father. Relief washed over me, followed by a renewed sense of betrayal from my wife. I decided it was time to confront her. I went to the hospital, and we had it out. She admitted to the affair, to the lies, and begged for forgiveness. But I couldn't just forgive and forget. I told her that I would always be there for our child, but I couldn't be there for her, not as her husband. Her family was furious. They threatened to fight for custody, but I had the upper hand with the CPS report and the police report from her violent outburst. I was ready to fight tooth and nail for my child. The aftermath was messy. My wife was released into the care of her mother and sister, who had decided to stay in town to support her. I went back to work, taking the baby to daycare and picking him up every day. My parents helped when they could, and my friends were a constant support. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted my wife to understand the consequences of her actions, not just for her affair, but for the danger she had put our child in. I filed for divorce and full custody. It was a long and painful process, but in the end, I was granted full custody, with my wife getting supervised visitation once she was deemed stable enough. I rebuilt the nursery, making it a safe haven for my son. I started attending a support group for single fathers, and I found a sense of community I didn't know I was missing. As for my wife, she's getting the help she needs, and I hope one day she can be a part of our son's life in a healthy way. But for now, I'm focused on being the best father I can be. Thanks for reading. My husband and his friend pressure me to name our son after his black friend, but I stand my ground and teach them a lesson about respect by choosing a name that honors both our families without giving in to their demands. My 32-year-old female husband, 30-year-old male, and I are both white and live in the U.S. Right now, I'm 5 months pregnant with our first son. My husband and his best friend, who is black, were thrilled to hear it was a boy. They've been close for a long time, and I also consider him one of my own friends. His friend has a son and a daughter. Apparently, both he and his wife had personal boy names, both first and middle. They really wanted for a son. His wife's name idea was someone who passed away only a bit before she gave birth. He caved and let her name their son, both the first and middle name she wanted. They planned on having a bigger family, so he figured he could just name their second son. The birth of their daughter was very difficult, and now his wife can't have any more biological kids. His daughter is now a toddler, and he still constantly complains about not getting to give a son the name he wanted. It's the name of his younger brother who got sick and passed away. He has no other siblings, so the name doesn't have anyone to be passed down to. I don't have any strong name preferences. I just couldn't think of anyone that really resonated with me. My husband was happy when I said he could choose one, and we could discuss it together. A couple of days ago, we were at a little get-together where he and his friend sat me down. They said they thought it would be a fantastic idea to give our son the name his friend always wanted to pass on. I don't really understand why he wants to pass on the name to a child he isn't even related to, but I didn't mention any of that. I don't know how to word this without sounding super weird, but the name he's thinking of is very obviously a Black name. I think those names are beautiful, but I don't want to give my son one. I guess my thoughts were seen on my face, and they asked what was wrong. I decided to be blunt and say I'm not a huge fan of that name for our son. They began to conduct some sort of interrogation on why I don't want that name. My husband kept pointing out when I said I didn't have a preference for any particular one. His friend blurted out, "Wait, I bet you think it's just a stupid ghetto name, huh?" My mind was racing, and I couldn't organize my thoughts fast enough. He then got up and left. My husband wouldn't talk to me again until we were home alone later that night. He was very upset that my bigotry was stopping me from giving our son a very nice name just because he's white. It is a nice name, but I have some personal history related to this topic. I have a half-sister, a couple of years younger than me, who is mixed. She has a very light skin complexion, though. She has a name that's similar to the one I'm thinking of. She was bullied a lot by a bunch of bratty kids. Sometimes even adults would scoff or make a remark about how she certainly doesn't seem the type to be stuck with a name like that. She's confused and tells me how sometimes she feels the name makes people take her less seriously. A couple of my friends who are Black with those types of names have told me the same thing. They are all nice names, and it's a damn shame the world is so bigoted that even grown-ass adults see people with those names as lesser than. I truly hope the world can become accepting enough so that people who see those names don't have a second thought about them. But that world doesn't exist yet. And I feel like my son might struggle a bit in this cruel, judgy world. Even after explaining all this, my husband is still mad and says I'm just as bad as those who make fun of those names by remaining a bystander. Apparently, since I mentioned the name was fine aesthetically, the only thing that's the issue is my prejudice. Some of my friends say the same thing. This whole pregnancy has left me so exhausted I don't want to deal with anything anymore. I can't even think straight. I'm feeling more and more guilty over all this. Am I the idiot? Now, for a few comments before the update, comment 1. I don't understand his friend's logic. He wasn't allowed to pick the name of his son, so he wants to bully someone into losing their privilege of naming their own child. Honestly, stand your ground and point that out to him. It's not your responsibility to make this up for him. He needs to discuss this with his wife. Better yet, tell his wife what he's doing. Bullying a pregnant woman is wild. Your husband is a piece of shit. If you can, go stay with someone you trust. Don't let them stress you out, not the idiot. Comment 2. Why is your husband prioritizing his friend's wishes over his own wife, who is carrying his child? What is wrong with him? Don't apologize and instead get angry. He owes you an apology for making you feel terrible. There is no way you want your son to have any name, regardless of race, that he will be made fun of. Your husband is a jerk and needs to remember that he is married to you, not his whiny friend, not the idiot. Now for the update, thanks for sticking around for more of my ongoing saga. So after that whole name mess, things went from bad to worse. My husband's friend, let's call him Mark, decided to throw a curveball into our already strained relationship. He went around telling our mutual friends that I was the one being unreasonable and that my husband was just trying to honor a lost loved one. The gossip spread like wildfire, and suddenly I was the villain in everyone's eyes. But that wasn't enough for Mark. He took it a step further by orchestrating a surprise baby shower for us. Sounds nice, right? Wrong. He made sure to decorate the whole place with items that had the name he wanted for our son plastered all over them. It was like walking into a trap, and I was the prey. My husband, caught up in the moment, loved it. He was so touched by Mark's gesture that he didn't see the manipulation behind it. I felt betrayed, cornered, and humiliated in front of all our friends. I left the party early, fuming and hurt. The next day, I had a heart-to-heart with my half-sister about everything. She understood my concerns better than anyone and gave me the courage to take a stand. I decided it was time to flip the script. I went to Mark's house, and we had it out. I told him that while I respected his feelings, he had no right to impose his will on our child. I reminded him that this was our son, not his, and that his actions were crossing a line. Mark was taken aback. He hadn't expected me to confront him, and for the first time, he seemed to realize the impact of his actions. Feeling empowered, I returned home to talk to my husband. I laid it all out for him, my feelings, my sister's experiences, and how Mark's behavior was affecting our marriage. It was a tough conversation, but it needed to happen. To my surprise, my husband listened. He hadn't seen things from my perspective before, and he finally understood why I was so upset. We agreed to choose a name together, one that we both loved and felt was right for our son. It was a moment of peace in a storm of drama, and I felt like we were finally on the same page again. But just when I thought the drama was over, Mark's wife called me. She was furious, accusing me of ruining her husband's friendship with mine and being a selfish person. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't hear it. She hung up on me, and I knew that this was far from over. The aftermath was messy. Our circle of friends was divided, some siding with Mark and his wife, others with us. It was a rift that I feared would never heal. But through it all, my husband and I grew closer, united by our desire to protect our son from the chaos around us. We ended up choosing a name that honored both our families, a name that felt like a fresh start. It was our way of moving forward, of creating something beautiful out of the mess that had been made. Thanks for reading through this whirlwind of events. My husband cheats with my sister, and grandfather insults him, so I play nice until they least expect it. And then I drain our joint bank accounts and leave him penniless and alone. My 36-year-old female, husband, 35-year-old male, and I have been married for 3 years. My husband works at a fast food restaurant, and I work at a hospital as a registrar. We both share finances. We don't have separate accounts because we don't need to yet, although we have multiple shared accounts. Since I earn more, I pay more, which is completely normal and logical. But my grandfather, my dad's father, thinks otherwise. He is an unpleasant guy, and I don't like to be around him, unlike my other grandfather, my mom's father. He is a very old man now and uses a wheelchair, yet he is still the same person. His son got sick and tired of him, so he asked his sister to take care of him. The sister got sick and tired, so she asked my dad, the second brother, to take care of him. My dad agreed because what other choice do they have? Their mother refused to let them take him to a nursing home. My parents will be traveling for a week, so I had to welcome my grandfather for that week. I only have one sister, and she lives in another city. He started to make some comments to my husband and me, asking whether I was infertile or what since we don't have kids together, despite him knowing that I got pregnant before. Of course, I didn't tell him that my husband can't have kids, and I'm not so fond of them because he will start saying stuff about him, and I can't ignore this man insulting my husband. He asked how much money I paid my husband to sleep with him. I didn't quite get that insult. Is it meant as, your man is a prostitute, or you can't get a guy unless you paid him? Eventually, he started making fun of my husband's job. He said that he isn't a responsible person and can't provide for his wife. Can't get his wife pregnant, in his definition, not a real man. I couldn't care less about him being a real man, whatever that's supposed to mean. I don't think he knew that my husband is infertile. I believe he just said that randomly because how would he even know? Anyway, this isn't the first time he insulted my husband, and it isn't the first time we fought. But this time, just like everyone else, I got sick and tired of it. I told him to either shut up or I'd throw him out of the house without his chair so he'd crawl all the way back. Then I said, you know what, I'm doing that. Of course, I didn't take the wheelchair, but I did kick him out of my house. It was noon. He kept knocking and ringing the bell, but I was too mad to open the door. After an hour or so, I opened the door and told him he wouldn't take a single step until he apologized to my husband, and only if he accepted the apology. I can tell that he felt humiliated. But he apologized, and my husband accepted the apology. He called my grandmother and she called me, saying that I am a vice person for treating an elderly disabled person that way. Am I the idiot? Did I take it too far? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Your grandfather sounds like he was a nasty man in his younger days, and he has remained the same obnoxious person that he always was. Soon he will be wheeled off into a nursing home if he continues to alienate his family. Comment 2. Not the idiot. People tend to forget that being mean towards those who buy your food and pay rent is a foolish thing to do. Their mother refused to let them take him to a nursing home. Then she can take him in. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around. A lot has happened since my last post. So after the whole mess with my grandfather, things seemed to quiet down for a bit. But then, my sister called. She was in tears, saying she's getting a divorce. Her husband had been cheating on her, and she found out in the worst way possible, walked in on them. She was devastated and needed a place to stay. Of course, I said she could come here. The day she arrived, my husband was late from work. He said there was a big mess at the restaurant, some fryer exploded or something. But when he walked in, I could tell something was off. He was too calm, almost like he was hiding something. I didn't push it though, with my sister being there and all. My sister stayed in the guest room, and that's when things got weird. She started spending a lot of time with my husband, talking and laughing. I thought it was good for her, to have support. But then, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach turn. They were talking about a time before I met him, some tense night out they apparently shared. I never knew they knew each other before me. I confronted him, and he admitted they had a fling once, a long time ago. He said it meant nothing, and he didn't think it was important to tell me. I felt betrayed, not just by him, but by her too. How could she not tell me? But I let it slide. I mean, it was before my time, right? And my sister was going through enough with the divorce. Then my husband's phone rang in the middle of the night. It was his boss saying there was an emergency at the restaurant, and he needed to come in. He rushed out, and I tried to go back to sleep. But something didn't sit right with me. I called the restaurant, and guess what? No emergency. They said he wasn't even scheduled to work that night. I was fuming. I waited up for him, and when he came back, I demanded the truth. Turns out he'd been seeing someone from work. He said it was just a few times, that he was sorry and it wouldn't happen again. I was so angry I couldn't even look at him. But I didn't kick him out. I don't know why. Maybe because of my sister being there, or maybe because I didn't want to face it all alone. The next day, my sister decided to move back to her city. She said she needed to start fresh, and I understood. But she left without apologizing, without acknowledging the mess she was leaving behind. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, my grandfather had a fall. My dad called, saying he was in the hospital. He broke his hip, and they were talking about surgery. I felt guilty for kicking him out that day, even though he was a nasty old man. My dad said he was asking for me, but I couldn't bring myself to go see him. So here I am, stuck in this mess. My husband's betrayal, my sister's departure, and my grandfather's accident. It's like everything's falling apart around me, but I'm still here, still trying to make it work with my husband. I don't know if I'm being foolish, or if it's just easier to pretend everything's fine. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.